and I go back and put it.
That's funny.
I don't want to disappear off the thing.
Okay, I think I did it. All right, let's go.
Okay. So it's Paul Krause and Annabelle Pacheco. This is Annabelle's multifamily, getting your first multifamily deal, February 22nd, 2023. And today we have a great host with us, personal friend, as well as business colleague. His name is Brian Vandermeulen, and Brian and I know each other from the National Council of Exchangers. Brian has been in commercial real estate. Brian, remind me again what year you started.
2000. Well, I've been licensed since 04, but really got into commercial in 08.
All right, so 2008, I got into real estate in 06, and I got into commercial in 2019/20. So Brian's got quite a bit of experience. Thanks for everyone being on the call. Hey, Bob, how are you doing today? I heard you talking a little bit about your deal.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting. We'd love to talk to you about it after the call today. We are going to go off subject a little bit today with a great specialist, someone who really understands their product type extremely well. So we're going to be talking today about self-storage. And hi, Roxy. Hello there. So we're going to talk about self-storage. Brian is very familiar with not only several product types in the commercial real estate, but one that he is very passionate about, which is self-storage. Self-storage is something that is new to me in terms of I have not done a self-storage deal. I've done primarily multifamily, and that is the call that we're on today. But we're going to introduce this product type to folks because in terms of growing your business, at some point when you're talking to people who own real estate, you never know what product type they're going to own, whether they own multifamily or whether they own self-storage or car washes or laundromats. So this is a great way to talk to somebody and maybe even ask a couple questions about the topic of self-storage and as an investment asset class. So thanks everybody for being on. And remember, please, to post your questions to the chat box. Roxy and Bob, thanks for joining us today. And Annabelle will keep letting folks in as they come on in. But it's 10 after, so we're going to get going. So Brian, welcome to our call. Thanks for being on today. I know that the weather here in California has been up and down, and people are either sick or they're feeling sick or they're about to get sick. So I'm glad everyone could join us that they could. And I'm sure it's nice in Phoenix today. I was just in Arizona.
Raining and 54 degrees.
Oh, it's raining. Oh, wow. Okay. So I got out just in time.
It was beautiful yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I was in Arizona yesterday. Okay, good. Well, Brian, thanks again for joining. So at this point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of hand it over a little bit to Brian to talk a little bit about self-storage as an investment class. And what I would like to start out with is just, Brian, you got invested, or I'm sorry, you started in real estate, in commercial real estate quite a bit sooner than me. What got you interested in the self-storage space, and what is it about self-storage that people on this call might be able to take away as far as why it might be a good investment as an asset class?
Well, really compared to, and maybe I can use Bob's example, or since you do multifamily as well, and you know this, there's a lot less toilets. That's the primary key. The secondary primary key is the tenant base. There's multiple. There's probably a 10 top reasons of why to invest in self-storage as compared to most other type of asset classes. And I'll run through just quickly, and then since it's such a short crowd today, we can ask questions and make it more interactive that way.
Sure.
Bottom line is a lot less toilets. You have one, maybe two toilets on campus on a 5-acre to 10-acre property, whatever. Typically not more than that. The lawn furniture doesn't complain that the lawnmower and 2 doors down is being too loud, right? The lawnmower.
So you're talking about tenant issues. There's no tenant issues. Yeah.
The only tenant issues is they don't pay, and you have probably 90 days or less to get them out. And it's a Someone says it's kind of hard to hear. That's hard to hear you, Paul?
Oh, it is? Okay. I didn't do anything differently, but
I
can you guys hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
I actually hear you really loud.
Yeah. So do
Oh,
I.
yeah. Okay. Roxy, turn your volume up just to make sure you're turned up.
Because Paul's real loud.
Yeah.
I'll
So,
step
you know,
back.
basically, there's limited tenant challenges. The biggest challenge I've ever had with a tenant is where, well, let's see, maybe two, and they're pretty minor. One brought crappy product, meaning junky, taped up, moldy, low income style furniture to the property, had it there for probably 2 years, and then complained when they left that it was moldy and ratty and torn up. I'm like, you brought it that way. So they tried to get us to pay for their property. And we don't cover tenants' contents. You're responsible for your own what's called tenant protection plan, up to $2,500 or $5,000, depending on what state you're in. You can sell insurance, but you got to go through a process to get certified to do that because you're technically not insurance agents. So that there's a story around that. But the bottom line is we don't cover any of your stuff. So what you brought is how you bring it. If the lawnmower catches fire down the street, I only cover my building. I'm sorry, the 2 doors down, I only cover my building as my own property insurance, not your contents.
And
And
they all,
Brian, just so people are familiar too, you know, the structure behind you is a self-storage structure. The structure itself, you obviously own that as a building. If that were to burn down, does your insurance cover that in the event that, let's just say I'm renting out a self-storage space and in that fire, let's just say I lost a musical instrument that had,
Doesn't cover
a lot of
anything. It
value.
doesn't cover any contents.
Okay, great. So
Only
this
covers
is a real
structure and
Yeah.
only covers my loss of income, and that's a rider on the policy that I have to pay for.
Okay, so your insurance is really covering only your loss.
100%.
And even if your building catches fire because of something, the person who has stuff in your storage building, their personal property is theirs to insure.
Correct.
Okay, thanks
And
for clarifying
public
that.
storage, extra space, most of your big brand REITs, if you want to call it that, will not allow you to enter their property without having written proof of your own coverage as a homeowner's rider or on file, or you pay for their offered plan. So they have almost 100% coverage in some fashion. You know, it might be 80%, but 20 people might out of 100 might not have it. But for the most part, that's just how they run their business.
Yeah.
Like the no shirt, no shoes. You can't come in if you don't have those things. That's just how it works. Go ahead.
and they're aware when they bring their stuff in, they're aware of this.
100%, and it's in the lease.
Okay, it is a lease. Okay.
It's a check mark they sign up on the lease. And like I said, in the bigger, highly managed or well managed ones are maybe not your mom and pops that don't really, Betty Smith comes in and rents from Paul, and they know each other from high school, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're lackadaisy on the rules and regulations. They may not even have a lease. But anything like the one behind me is about 100,000 square foot one I designed in Phoenix. That would have in place documentation. You'd sign as a tenant would sign off on what the rules and regulations are, what the operating hours are, what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to store, what you're not allowed to store, what you're paying for, what you're not paying for, whatever, what your coverages are, all that's spelled out.
Wow. That's
And also to clarify, Brian, if there's an illegal activity going on, that person's insurance probably does not cover that illegal activity. Is that right? Like, in other words, if
I would assume so. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just to clarify even further, like a self-storage space is not some like sovereign space that people can just do whatever they want either. Yeah.
Nope, not at all.
Okay.
It's pretty well governed. Going back to the some of the top 10 reasons, the operating costs are typically 30 to 40% of the total gross income. You might get to 25% if you're lucky, but you're typically at 32 to 38% on average of operating costs. Comparatively, multifamily can be considerably higher than that. I can typically, without debt in mind, I can typically operate the storage facility at 50% occupied and still cash flow to cover all your bases. You can't do that in multifamily in most cases. The ease of financing is another one. Over the last maybe 8 to 10 years, self-storage has been deemed a owner-occupant type property because they're running a business out of it. So you can qualify for SBA lending. Granted, it's more expensive. However, that was the ease to entry in the last 6 to 8, 10 years of getting SBA loan, 10 to 15% down, and getting pretty successful with the business.
Brian, let's talk about that just real quick. So in an SBA loan, that's one form of financing, capital financing to buy self-storage. But what are some, maybe this is an important aspect. What are some of the ways you can finance self-storage? I mean, is it harder than multifamily? Is it easier? Is it the same?
I would say it's the same, yet multifamily, every asset class typically has its window of opportunity to where I think in the last 10 years-ish, over the run of the development cycle, rates got really low, multifamily got to be the hot spot, whereas it'll rotate between office is hot, retail is hot, multifamily is hot, now storage is hot. So the lending across the board is generally the same. However, depending on what market you're at, and whether you're going with a Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Bob's Credit Union, right? Bob's Credit Union is always going to have a better appetite for local lending than a corporate national bank is.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Just to share with everybody who's joining the call, this is Brian Vintermulen. Brian is his own broker now. So congratulations, Brian.
Thank you.
He's a broker in Arizona. He operates out of the greater Phoenix area. And we are talking about self-storage, and we're having a talk about this product type, this asset class, because as he's going through here, his list of 1 through 10, there are some really big advantages. One of them being that you don't have tenants, so you don't have tenant problems. The insurance is a lower cost because you're.
Let me clarify. You have tenants. You have a different quality of interaction with the tenants.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Hey, Fidel, can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry.
Here, I'll mute people.
No problem. I just want to make sure that people have conversations going on that we're able to allow our speaker to talk. So, Brian, go right ahead. You were talking about some of the advantages of investing in self-storage. So, go right ahead.
So we've covered, the low operating costs. We've covered the ease of financing. We've covered the low to no toilets for the most part. We've covered the relatively ease of tenant interaction. When you don't have a place where somebody lives, you're not tied to all the landlord-tenant laws. This is a lien, a property lien. So if you don't pay your bill, I lien your property. I can't touch it. You can roll up the door and look at it and take a picture and auction online and sell the entire contents. You can't go dig through it and pick out all the fancy stuff and keep it for yourself and then sell the junk. You sell the entire box. And so it's typically, you're doing the first, you're late on the 5th. You have a late fee on the 6th of $20, maybe more. Typically it's 10 to 20% of the value of the unit. Of the value of the rental on the unit. The overlock goes on the 10th. This is how I did it. So people might do it earlier, but I would do an overlock on the 10th. By the roll of the next month, if you don't pay again, you get another late fee. And by day 50-ish, you'd get a lien fee of an additional $50 on top of the other fees, plus your base rent that's due. And then I think about 65 days-ish, again, depending on which state, we can begin the auction process. Old school states like South Carolina that are still far behind in the times, you would typically have to publish it in a newspaper or publish it somewhere locally, some marketing ploy locally before you could have the auction for 2 weeks. So typically by 90 days total, you auction the stuff. If let's say you owe me $500 and I only get $350, well then I'm in a loss. If I get $750, I keep what is owed, the $500, and I have to give the tenant back the other overage of whatever that unit came from, right? I can't keep the entire balance.
Okay.
I can't keep anything more than I'm owed.
Right.
Including fees and rent and whatever.
And just to let everybody know as well, that's actually similar to, like, say, a foreclosure where someone has equity. Some people have asked questions about that in the past. If a house gets foreclosed, and if it's worth more than what was owed on the property that's being foreclosed, does the lender get to keep that overage? The answer is no. That goes back to the previous owner. So what Brian's describing is what's called equitable. Only what is owed is restored and repaid. That's it. So Brian, continue on. This is good info.
And for the most part, we want the unit back. We don't want to drag it for 9 months down the road. We want you to pay or get out, because we want to be able to re-rent the unit at a higher market rate or whatever to have options.
Okay, great.
Okay, then I would have said the market's in its infancy. It's not really anymore. It's a pretty advanced market and growing pretty rapidly.
Yeah, Brian, this seems to be a market that, you can find small self-storage spaces, but we also find that there's giant, huge ones in the bigger cities. So, like, what would you say?
Multifamily.
Yeah. So, I mean, for an individual investor like the people on this call here, what is the actual average size deal that, how many units would go on, say, a $2 million deal or $1.5 million deal if it was, say, in the South, like the Southeast, Georgia, Florida, or any place that you'd like to use as an example?
So it's kind of a broad question, and it's hard to give a specific answer. I looked at one this morning that was, I looked at one a few minutes ago. It's $1 million. Let me give you an example. The one behind me, just because that's a 89,000 square feet net rentable on 5.5 acres. I'll give you two examples, both which I've done.
Okay, so 5.5 acre land, 8,900 square foot building.
89,000 square feet.
Oh, 89,000. Thank you.
Almost 100,000 square feet.
Okay.
Build for about $7.5 million. It has a tax value of $14.5 million today. 15 million today.
Wow. Okay.
I was going to be involved in that deal. I did the rezoning on the land. So one of the persons asked, do I build? And yes. So this one was a rezone. Took me about a year to do a rezone just on the raw dirt. My partner backed out prior to getting a loan because he was afraid of getting a big loan. We could have raised the equity easily for the down payment. We were going to get an SBA loan for the build, and he backed out. So we had to sell it. So we were under contract for 800,000. This was in 17. We only had earnest money for 25 grand, and we had about 50 grand ish in soft development costs or hard development costs into the city for permits and planning and architecture and, all the generic stuff, engineers, whatever, just pre-development, pre-going vertical, just paperwork costs. And so we sold the land for $1.4 million with the site plan in place. So I had site plan approval from the city, and I had already got zoning approval from the city for a conditional use permit. So I sold it short of having construction drawings and going vertical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So we sold it for $1.4 million. He took the cash, and I got a fee.
Yeah, that's a nice little profit. And you know what is sometimes not building and just selling something that you've done maybe a little bit of work, ready to improve, ready to build. That's something that anyone who has a piece of land that does a little bit of work, maybe want to entitle the property, can make some money. They don't have to go through the entire process. Now, what Roxy was asking was not only do you buy the land to build on, but like, how would you find a suitable piece of land? Are you looking at population demographic? Are you looking at some specific type of zoning? Like, what would make you look at a piece of land and go, this is a great location for self-storage right here, and this is why?
So there's a couple ways to answer that. Most of the stuff I do, like the one behind me, was gut feeling. I was going to a broker. I was getting my broker's my agent's license in Phoenix in 2016. I went to a small brokerage house and I said, hey, this is what I do. He goes, hey, my brother-in-law is a developer. I said, well, I primarily do self-storage. I'm looking for some opportunity. I said, what do you got? He goes, I just happen to have a piece down here in Phoenix. My brother-in-law is buying 8 acres and we would like to sell up a chunk of that to somebody who wants to do some storage. I said, fine, let me look at it. And you know the factor of you look at 100 to get one deal, right? You know, a lot of them don't work. So I looked at the land and I said, just visually, the demographics, run up a hard corner, across street from Lowe's. I said, fine, I'll take it. You know, just I put it under contract within a couple of days, and started going through the rezoning process. I hired the architect. I hired the construction management company because all of us are so-called developers in our own way. And a developer is somebody who can manage all the chaos. You don't have to go lay concrete. You don't have to do grading. You don't have to learn how to do plumbing or electrical or HVAC or.
Probably better you don't too, right?
I'm sorry?
It's probably better you don't.
It's probably better you don't, but you might have a general understanding, which you'll learn along the way, right?
Sure.
And all of us never had a job until we got a job, right? And whatever it was, we learned that trade during that process. So a job like this is, I said, I interviewed builders. I interviewed, I knew the construction management company through the self-storage association. I said, okay, who do you like for an architect? I need an architect, I need an engineer. I need all those people. Who do you like and who do you work well with? Who works well with the city? Who plays well with all the people on development in this sector of town? You don't want to, one of the challenges I had early on in this project, I brought in I thought because they were big and fancy to do a feasibility study for me. They were out of California. Well, this was a location in Phoenix, and they made it look and sound like a property that would belong in California. And I'm like, something didn't sit well. So I said, I need to do it again. So I paid another $10,000 to have a secondary one done, and it with a local person that could kind of go tail back, the massive amount of money they said the thing was going to be worth. They weren't far off. They said it would be worth 24 million, 15 or 18 million is close, but we didn't know that going in the market. And I didn't want to be selling that to investors or to the banks, say, hey, I think it's worth 30 million bucks, but we're going to build it for 5. The numbers didn't sound right. So those are things you learn along the way, and you may have to pay double for if you don't get it what you want the first time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and let's kind of talk a little about what you're saying right there as well, because, okay, 5 to 30, most people in their mind are thinking, what 6X's in the marketplace, right? Like what investment is going to grow 6 times? So Brian, do you have a formula that you use in order to determine, okay, I now see a great piece of land. Let's just call it 10 acres of land. Maybe it's in, Scottsdale or some part of town that you're familiar with. Do you have a formula that you use that all of a sudden you start determining, I can get 350 units on that piece of land? Like, what does that look like for the average investor like us, who we've never done a self-storage deal before, but we'd like to be able to pencil something out if we saw a piece of land that we think might be desirable because it's in between, the path of progress, so to speak?
So let me answer that a couple different ways. For those that, how do I say this? I don't want you to figure anything out, because you as a multifamily person or somebody with no experience in the storage business will prejudge of what you think will fit and or what you think won't work or will work. If you just
this is a good answer. So in other words, call you.
100%.
That's the answer.
Text me 123 Main Street in this town, this city, and I'll tell you within 5 minutes if I like it or not.
And just to let everybody know, Brian will share his contact info with you, because what he's saying here makes a lot of sense. It's hard to be a jack of all trades and a master of none and still be successful in this business. So at some point, it makes a lot of sense to say, and I love how Brian just answered that, don't try to figure it out. Just text me the address and I'll help you understand if you've got something here. So I'm happy with that
I'm
answer.
the buyer. So I'm looking to acquire land, existing facilities. We can work through the process of helping educate you on a little bit here and there. Don't call me and expect a full education on, every phone call, right? Because it's just not going to happen. When I'm looking at, and I don't know multifamily as well. I know how to do multifamily, but I choose not to. But if I'm looking at an area, I'll call Paul and say, what do you think about this? Because he could tell just like that of what rents are. You all that are in the multifamily can look at an aerial view of a neighborhood and go, I not think that's going to work there. Or you go, okay, I get it. I think I can get, you can make 2 phone calls. You can spend 5 minutes on Google and go, okay, I can raise rents 18% or 24% in a neighborhood within a realm. Storage is very similar for me. It's a 1, 3, 5 mile radius. What I do is I look at it and go, can I build a better mousetrap for building a better mousetrap that's going to, I don't want to say suck inventory and clientele from other places, but if you know that a restaurant makes just a okay food, but the service is ridiculously better, it's the same old 1970s Denny's restaurant, whatever the case may be, you're going to go where you're going to get better service. You're going to go where it's an ease of access and you feel better about your experience. So that's when I look at self-storage is, can I build something that the consumer, me, I'm going to want to go schlep to and get the stuff out of Thanksgiving decorations or Christmas decorations for my wife. Am I going to enjoy the experience while I'm there? Am I going to know where it's at? Can I get in and out easily enough? Does the place always look clean and well lit? Is it trashed? If all the other neighborhood looks like that, then I can come build a better project.
Yeah.
I can even go take an older property and clean it up just by changing the lighting, painting it, just like you guys do with multifamily, and then raise rents. So that's just something to think about when you're looking at areas.
Well, I love the way you asked that. I answer that, because at the end of the day, this sounds like a very specialized investment where utilizing space is much different than how we look at things in the multifamily space. And I know, even as someone who does mostly remodeling in multifamily, that if someone wanted to sell me just a piece of land because they thought that I could go build an 80-unit apartment complex, I myself would actually have to go to an architect to see if that's even true, first of all, because I don't do ground up. And then second, I'd have to go to the city and find out, would the city be willing to approve 80 units if my architect could show that I could put that number of apartments on the type of land that's being offered to me. So thanks for explaining it that way. I'm going to let you continue on here for a sec. I just need to go offline for one quick sec.
You all know, or as you are in the business, you know what works and what doesn't work. You either know it or you search out the education to learn it and go, okay, I know I can go. Someone pitched a property the other day and says, oh, I think it'll work for storage. It wouldn't, not even close, remotely work for storage. I was interested only because they said it's 5 acres. I said, okay, fine, I'll look at it if it's 5 acres. Well, it was in a cul-de-sac in a residential neighborhood, and the only access was down the residential street, a mile off the commercial road. You got to go through several neighborhoods to get there. It was an industrial zone property on the back half of what is a subdivision. So I said, instead of storage, because it won't work for that, the city would never allow that, even though it's labeled industrial, because it was a leftover parcel that was built up against from residential. And only left a little horseshoe of a place to get into. I said, why don't you consider putting like Paul said, a neighborhood of duplexes? It's a low income neighborhood. Go to the city and you start to figure out what the city wants. And if Paul's a city employee, hey, Paul, I see you guys got a lot going on in the city. What would you like? If I were to come to town as a developer, I don't live there, I don't know the area. What would you like me to go put there? And Paul says, I want this, this, and this. Well, then you go figure out in that town, because you already know Paul is in the city and he wants that. He says, you got that, I'll green light it. Okay, well, now I'm going to go search for the land and bring it back to Paul because he's going to stamp it. So don't go, hey, I'm going to go build storage there, and without asking what Paul wants, as an example.
Brian, I've done that too, just let you know, where somebody showed me a property that was going for $1 on Zillow, and we'll do that exercise next week. But there's this game I sometimes play, look for the dollar property on Zillow, and it turned out this one piece of property was on the was on the Wisconsin Minnesota border, and when I called the building department, I asked them, "What would you guys, what would you guys like to see happen with this building? You guys are selling it for $1." They basically said, "Well, the address at 123 Main Street was recently done. We love that project, and we would love to see this building be just like that building. And if you have some funds that you can start the project, I can have you meet with such and such person who can get you the funds from the community block grant that will help finish that building." So to your point, including the building department into your plans, absolutely, it does work. I mean, though, there are people there who absolutely know what they want there. So great. That's
I have
great
two other quick
feedback.
examples, and then we'll just kind of cut it off and let people ask questions.
Sure.
Somebody had a piece of property, two pieces of property, since we were talking development. One in Oregon on the coast. Paul, you've seen this piece of land. It's kind of it's a nursery, but it kind of runs up the hill, overlooks the Pacific Ocean, beautiful view, has just enough of an incline. I said, it's not going to work for storage. However, what about if I came to the town and put in a small home community, stair-stepped it, put some green, eclectic, it's up in Oregon, make it the hippie kind of look and feel and vibe. That's really trendy. And somebody else has already done that twice along the Oregon coast. A developer done that. He bought a nursery and turned it into a small community type home community. So I call the local city and planning. Well, we're not sure. Why don't you go talk to so-and-so? So I called, talk to so-and-so. And this person says, I don't think you're ever going to get it done, but let me go have you talk to so-and-so. And he goes, you'll never get it done. It's conservation land. It will only ever be greenery. He said, you'd have to go to the state Supreme Court to get us to change our mind. And we probably would tell you no anyway.
There you go.
Why
you avoided a really big waste of time, right?
Totally. I could go into contract. I could put a bunch of money up, and they said, we will take your money all along the way and tell you no every step of the way. He said, but why do that? Why not just tell you no now?
Yeah.
Said, yeah, I appreciate that. So just within a couple of quick phone calls, and if you don't know how to talk to the city, call me. We can have a phone call. I'll conference call with people, to talk with sellers or to talk with the city. Multifamily, it doesn't matter. I know any of the product types. Another one was similar.
I'd like to add to that, Brian, because I know that I've done that. And actually, the city, when you go to the city and you get the city involved, they'll even tell you, they'll say, if there's additional property around, maybe the property that you're looking at, they'll say, well, go talk to these two, because if these two can sell, now we're talking a beautiful piece of property. Now we've got parcels where you could build something that the city will totally just go for it. And the approval process will just be so much easier.
When you come to the city can be a total pain in your side.
For sure.
When you come to the city and with the avenue of contribution, how can I help you? Because I called another one, I got two more, another one in Oregon. Vacant building my son found. Could be a little cafe, something like that, right on a small town in Lincoln City, Oregon. Beautiful little corner, quaint little coastal town. Been vacant building, needed a drive-through. And I called the city, like, what do you want? I'm like, I'm just calling to see if I can help. She goes, really? Nobody calls to want to help. They always call to freaking complain. Are you sure you don't have anything to complain about? I said, no. I said, I want to help you. I found a property that is ugly in your town. I would like to come to town and spend $500,000 fixing it up. What would you like to see there? Well, really? Wow, we would like this. We'd like a donuts, a Voodoo Donuts out of Portland. We'd love to have come down here. She said, but you'll never get this, and this done. And then we found out it was on where the streets, one street is the city and the other one is the city revival area. And it was like right inside that little toothpick space. It just never got done because, one person said one thing and the other person says, yeah, we'd love it, but it's on the curbs touching the historic whatever, and you'll never get it done. So vice versa, things like that. I had one in Kansas, I think it was, called, it was a previous airport farm / private airport, had been condensed over the years from a family that's been around for 100 years. This was the remaining 35 acres along a main road. I said, I'll come to town. I'll build Flex Industrial 1. I'll build a car wash. I'll build some self-storage, and I'll build some small retail or something along this whole 35-acre strip. And call the city. The city says, That's all great, but if you can't build 100%, we only live off of, we have no property taxes, so we only live off of sales tax. If you can't build retail that's going to pay us sales tax, we're not even interested in talking to you. Oh, and by the way, how that leftover piece has gotten to, it's going to take $10 million of infrastructure to get it to be able to go vertical. Okay, so you're 15 million, the purchase price was 6 million for the dirt. And so you're another 10 million, so you're 15, 16 million dollars into dirt before you can go vertical, and you can only build retail.
Yeah.
Only something that provides tax revenue.
Right.
I said, sorry, none of the products I build are going to give you tax revenue. So you'll find a lot of things out by calling and talking to the cities, and you'll call and say, what else you got? Who do you know else in town? I had a place in small town, Nebraska, like 8,000 people. A client of mine had a building for sale, didn't know what to do with it, 10,000 square foot. I called the local chamber of commerce and said, hey, Bob, who this is me. I don't own the building. I'm just helping my client. I can't represent him. I'm not in town. Who do you know that wants to buy that building and that needs to be, who needs to be in that building? He goes, Jack over at, Johnson's Air Conditioning. He's been looking for a building. You need to call him. Paid cash, closed in less than 90 days.
Wow.
That's a great deal story. And you know what is that may not happen in a metro, right? But some of these small town USA or whatever, that's what can happen if you're willing to go beyond just the major metro areas.
Well, you just got to think outside the box. I didn't want to call the local realtor. They're like, go call the local realtor. He can get it done. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I've looked at all his other crappy listings that'll sit there and they just get it tied up. I said, who, as a chamber of commerce in town, who do you know as a member that's a standing up member in the community, who's helpful in the community, who wants to buy a building and who's looking to expand? He goes, he's been looking for buildings for 6 months. Didn't even know about it. Call him. Right. I called him and said, hey, Bob over at, Chamber of Commerce told me to call you, and done deal. I got a $12,000 consulting fee because I wasn't licensed in that area, and it didn't run through my brokerage.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end, everybody. So if anyone has any questions for Brian Vandermeer, and again, we're talking about self-storage today. We could probably have 3 more calls on this subject because honestly, we've already covered a lot of ground and we've barely even gotten through the surface. But the information you've already given us, Brian, has been excellent, and really appreciate your time today being on the call and some of your deal stories that you're describing. The outside the box stuff, problem solving strategy always works. So
let me give one last point for
absolutely, go ahead.
For those that are looking, and this will work for any property, Paul and I know from different exchange groups, is asking the right questions, asking enough questions, and then asking more questions and more questions. I bought a facility in South Carolina, it's 36,000 feet from the seller. Took me about 1.5 years or so to negotiate it. I was the young kid from California with the accent. She was from Southern Georgia. She said, yo, I ain't from around here, is you? So I had to bring in a guy, you probably know him, Paul, Mike Elkins. He was the tobacco chewing, John Deere driving, raised in the hills of North Carolina. I gave up half my assignment fee because that's what I needed to do to bring him in to help close the deal, because she didn't believe me. She only believed somebody that could spit, chew, and tobacco. I have a video. I'm in the backseat of his Suburban. They're talking in the front seat and he's spit and chew while talking to her, and they're getting along just fine. And that's when we close the deal on the property. Ask enough questions. And it wasn't about the money. I bought that one for $20,000 down with a master lease, subject to the first debt, with a seller carry second.
Wow, that's great. So you had nothing in the deal.
I had 0 in the deal. Bottom line was, what do you want to do? I don't want to show up anymore.
Repeat that again.
Yeah, that might have been a little bit fast. So Brian, describe how you bought that one again.
Yeah. Master
lease, $20,000 down, because that paid her $5,000 back payment, 1 month mortgage payment, and it paid $5,000, one half of her mortgage, her taxes for the year, and gave her, a couple grand, plus some closing costs, right? So her $20,000 total, $10,000 went to pay back payments, some $3,000 to $5,000 went to pay closing costs, and she got like $5 grand via a master lease, subject to the initial $400,000 bank debt that was on it that she was behind on. It would never finance, it would never cash flow, as it was. With a seller carry second for the balance. I bought it for $660,000. I sold it on an assignment fee to an investor, the same one that skipped on this deal, for $860,000, a $200,000 assignment fee on a $600,000 acquisition.
Wow.
And then it was convoluted, but in year 2, she tried to cancel my master lease. Well, we had put a note and mortgage as security against my master lease. So when she tried to cancel, because she went to church with the banker, she went to church with the appraiser, and went to church with whoever, and they said all those guys are screwing you. Well, now that we've got it all fixed up and cash flowing, she wanted it back. She said, "Well, I'm gonna cancel your lease, and you just unwind the deal and give it back to me." I said, "That ain't gonna happen." "Oh, by the way, we can. Here's how. Write me a check for $750,000 and we'll call it a day." Well, we knew she didn't have the money, but that was our security. She had signed the note and mortgage as collateral against the master lease. So in
That's a great strategy.
year
I've
1,
never heard
year
that.
2, she wanted to get paid off early. She had a 7-year note coinciding with the first mortgage to take her $200 and something thousand second, $240,000 second, I think it was. And she said, "I want to get paid now. You know, the JG Wentworth, we want our cash now." So we said, "Fine, here's how we can pay you. We're going to short the note," which we did. And we transferred that discount to the investor and said, "Hey, we did a capital call first when you bought it from me. His down payment, mine was 20, his was 120, 100 to me and my partner, 20 to her. When we paid off the second, it was more money, and we shorted the second to give her cash and gave that discount."
You discounted the second.
Correct.
Yeah, you didn't actually short sale it. You discounted. You reduced what was owed on the second.
We owed her 240.
Yeah.
She wanted money now in 2 years instead of 7. We said,
Yeah.
"That's not how this is going to work. Here's how we can pay you." So we gave her 150.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So I gave that additional discount to my investor on his deal.
Yeah, that's a
We
great
sold that
deal.
thing 5 years later for $1,165,000. It's probably worth $4 million now.
Wow. That's a great deal.
It's a great deal story too. Like
Fantastic deal story.
talk about being creative, and Brian had no money in that deal, and made a great,
one better than that,
huge
too.
fee.
That's for another call. I have another one better than that one.
Hold on. Let's pause for a second, because I think Captain Bob has a deal that if you take what you've heard Brian say today, you could possibly make that happen. You could do something. You really can do something on that deal that you're interested in.
I agree.
Are you there?
Yeah,
I mean, if you'd like to discuss more, we can definitely discuss more. But I mean, if you really see that property has that kind of upside, I mean, I'd probably look in a little, I would dig deep and figure a way of securing the deal and making whatever it is that you need contingent, so that at least you've secured the deal, and that seller knows that they need to do, whatever else you need them to do prior to you closing the deal.
Here's a quick thought for Bob. Maybe that's a secondary call that you and I, or the three of us, can have, Bob, outside the group for privacy concerns, since you don't control the contract. And we can let other people, or you, Annie, ask any questions before we get off the end of this call for the storage. Does that work?
yeah, sure. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Brian on self-storage that we haven't had a chance to get to? I know this is a ton of information. This is really great information as well. But are there any basic questions, or maybe, anything that Brian's discussed that you guys wanted to ask? Now would be the time, because we're coming up on the hour.
You could have Brian look at the participants. I have my phone number on there. He can contact me. Or
Yeah,
Ann.
Brian, do you see his info?
I don't have that unless you put it in the chat.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I don't either.
Annabelle put it in the chat. Yeah.
I don't have, let me see. Oh, there it is. Hold on.
Yeah, it's in there.
Hold on. It is,
Oh, no, it isn't.
no, it's not. Hold
Other
on.
participants. I'll put it in the chat.
I don't have that sign up
Yeah.
on my end. I'm just an attendee, Bob.
Oh, okay.
I have a thing,
My
Bob, where if I
information's in the chat.
highlight you, I can see it, but yeah.
But my information is in the chat. You can text me as
I'll
well.
put it here. It's 267-254-6826. 267-254-6826.
Okay.
So yeah, we can definitely jump on a call and discuss.
That's a great idea. Well, look, I mean, part of the reason to bring guests on these calls is so that you can follow up in the future, have a one-on-one with them as well, especially if you have a deal that you'd like to run by them. And hey, is this maybe something we could partner on, or would this be a big waste of time? And like Brian was saying, you know, he's a resource. He can tell you if it's a good deal. If it's not, and you guys are going to be wasting your time, he can save you and spare you all that wasted time as well. So glad everybody could join the call. We're coming up on the hour, so we're going to knock it off for now. But I appreciate Brian again being on and talking self-storage with us. Again, I'm Paul Krause. Annabelle Pacheco's
Yeah.
getting your first multifamily deal. Thanks everyone for joining. We will see you next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific time. And thanks all for being on.
Thanks,
All
everybody.
right. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks.
See you guys.
All righty. Have a good day.